So yes, we have just showed the 4K restoration of Razor Blade Smile up on the big screen, and now I'm here to talk to director, writer,
Yep.
creator,
Producer, editor,
everything.
yeah. Well, a lot of things, not everything, but a lot of things. Yeah.
Jake West of this movie to talk about it. Tell us a little bit about where this movie came from. What was the original inspiration, if you can remember? Because I know it's a while ago.
Yeah. Well, the original inspiration is that I'd made a lot of short films, and then I went to film school, and I made a kind of long short film called Club Death, which was my graduation film, and that was like a half an hour short film, which was also shot on 16mm. And I was doing a lot of sort of testing a lot of stuff out to see, could I make a longer film on a really low budget? So Club Death is 30 minutes, and that was shot for £4,000, and that's nothing. I mean, when you're shooting on film as well. But it was a way of thinking, well, okay, if I saved up and got a bit more money, I could maybe do a feature film for around, under 20 grand. The actual production budget of that film, the shooting budget was 12 grand, and then we had 8 grand for post to do, or just get the film stock processed and telecined. Because I cut the whole thing on video, because this is before non-linear editing. This is we were in an analog world still when this was made, but because it was shot on 16mm film, I could go back to the original camera negatives and scan them all back and do this 4K restoration. So, like I was saying to people earlier, this is the best the film has ever looked, and it's got the grade is how I want it to be now. It looks how I couldn't get it looking back at that time, just because the technology wasn't quite there. So because it's on film, it gives it this much longer life. So it's a pleasure to be bringing it back to people after over a quarter of a century.
It's a pleasure for us to have it. Thank you for showing it at Romford Horror Festival. And what kind of challenges do you come up against when you are trying to restore a movie like that? Because obviously, like you say, the way it was originally done, now you're going back and restoring it. What kind of challenges did you come up against, and what was the hardest part of that process?
Well, every sort of bit is slightly different, but the first thing was making sure that I had all the materials. But fortunately I did, because in around 2000 and I think it was about 2008, which is about 10 years after the film had been released. It was released in 1998 originally. I got a call from Manga/Palm Pictures, who were the company that released it and paid for us to do the blow-up and the big sound mix and put money into it to get it up to the cinema spec. They got in touch with me and said, we don't want to pay to have the film stored in the laboratory anymore. Do you want to take the materials, or it's going to be skipped, it's going to be binned? And I was like, fuck yeah, I want the materials. So for the last, since 2008, which is now 16 years or so, I've been carrying all these fucking film cans around with me, which is huge, and they're heavy, and they're it's just, and I was moving a lot in that point. I used to have the coffin as well, and that moved everywhere I went to. But yeah, so having the film materials, but because I hadn't been storing them in a kind of controlled temperature facility, it wasn't, they had been in my sort of in garages and in and in lofts and things like that. So initially it was getting all of the film, the actual original camera negatives, getting them all looked at by Silver Salt Restoration, who are doing a lot of restorations at the moment. They've got an ARRI XT film scanner, which is like £250,000 worth of kit, which is the best scanner you can use. But they had to go through all of the material and assess it initially by eye and by hand to make sure there's no shrinkage on the film, how much damage, if they were going to put it through, it had to be cleaned. All of that process took time. And then when they did the scanning, the materials was actually in pretty good shape. But they scanned it all, and then I got the 4K raw scans back, took that into DaVinci Resolved and rebuilt it, because it was done as an A/B checkerboard neg cut back in those days. So it was you had the A roll and a B roll, and between each cut there was spacer. But there was also a C roll for all of the effect shots, and doing effect shots back then was complicated, because you were going from standard 16, blowing it up to 35, so basically the film, when it was released in cinemas, was about 4 generations down from the original neg already, and it had been blown up as well. So the main challenge was, once it was all scanned, was doing a new grade, and then there was quite a bit of repair work to do. And literally I've spent the last 6 months or so going through by hand, despotting and repairing any tears and things like that. So that was really painstaking because I couldn't afford to do it. It's a bit like making the film again. It was me back in, like just working on this thing for ages. I know Vince Knight, the DPO, whatever, he's right at the back. He did the new grade with me, and we did an amazing job. And that took us a couple of months because we were doing it on and off as we were in Florida for a while. So we were doing it in the back of a cab. We were doing it on the airplane. We were like everywhere. We were just trying to get this thing finished.
Yeah.
So the main thing was going back to the materials and making sure that they were going to be good. And I think it is beautiful. I say it's the best I've ever seen it. I've seen details in there I never saw back in the day.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. So what is your most personally gratifying moment that you see up on the screen now, up on that big screen, 4K, looking absolutely gorgeous as it does?
I think just to see it back on the big screens, really. I mean, it's the whole thing. I can't really reduce it down to one moment because there's lots of images in there I'm proud of. But I love the beginning, all the black and white and red stuff, which was actually influenced by, I don't know if any of you've seen a vampire film called Blood and Roses by director Roger Vadim. It's a beautiful film. It's quite hard to find actually. It's not been re-released properly. But that's the black and white and red stuff was something that I got from that, which is also a vampire movie. Highly recommended if you get a chance to see it. But so seeing that stuff, I find it's got a real beauty to it. It looks very impressive, and it's amazing seeing that big.
So Razorblade Smile has somewhat of a cult following, you could say. Did you ever expect that when you first made this, or was it just?
Well, I don't. It was an independent film, so like the people in the Transylvania scene, a lot of them were from the London vampire group, and there was a much bigger kind of goth vampire type scene back then. So at the time, a lot of those people were really into it. So we did get people. I knew that it worked with that kind of community of people. But in terms of its lasting thing over the years, when people still come up to me and say, they really love it, that's still incredibly, it just makes you really chuffed. But because the film also got released all over the world, it's sold in loads of territories. So it's weird, I can be in France or in Germany and people will still know what it is, which is incredible.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You knew I would let you down at the last minute, didn't you?
Okay.
That's okay. That's what the vampire is. Darling.
Have a seat.
You'll take my blood later. I hope.
A vampire can never be late.
No.
For half a century. What sort of time do you call this?
Half a century later.
Thank you for joining us, Eileen. It's a pleasure.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
So you've been signing?
No, I've been drinking.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, well, of course.
What grade did you give it?
I gave it a grade A.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Well, it was quite nice.
No wonder you're late.
Yeah. Grade A is good.
So let's talk a little bit about this collaboration. How did Eileen come onto the project?
I think Eileen should answer that one. Yeah.
Right. I was working with Nigel in Soho. We had started up Redemption Films, and we just met some wonderful, wonderful people. They're all very young. Young filmmakers, Elazar Cabrera. We met so many. They come up and they were interested in the projects that Nigel was doing. I was modelling. I was doing loads of bits and pieces. And it was a nice time. And Jake came, didn't you? Yeah. Jake turned up and said, "I'm Jake," and we kind of sort of like had a bit of a romance. All of us was together. It was a nice time. He'd had a script. He was thinking about doing the movie, and he had a few people in mind, which were very good and quite big at the time. They were sort of like commercial girls, and they were beautiful, lovely girls. And I was doing a lot for Redemption with and I'd done a lot of low-budget vampire films. And he said, "Well, I'm quite interested in you doing the casting for Razorblade Smile." Oh, he gave me the script, and I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. I think Jake was 25 years old, 26. Yep. He was kind of a greenhorn baby, wonderful, because Jake was fantastic at editing. He was the king of editors. I asked Jake before Razorblade Smile. I'd asked him, could you possibly put my show reel together? you know, to get other work. And Jake did me the most amazing show reel. For that time, he'd cut and sliced and done that. And I had my own Eileen Daly show reel that Jake did. And he did it with love. He really did. He did it. He didn't ask for anything. He did it because he wanted to do it. It was that kind of era. You did things that you wanted to do, and you shared, and you took, you know, and you made opportunities for each other, not for gain, just as a sort of film indie low budget community. It wasn't, you know, we did things.
Yeah, well, no, definitely, yeah, because Eileen had worked with Alex Shandon previously.
Yes, Alex, lovely.
And Emily Booth, who
Yes.
I worked with on Evil Aliens, and they had done a film called Pervrella, and
Yes.
Alex I'd become friends with because he was one of the few other guys making low-budget
Yes.
films in the UK. There was hardly anyone at that
No,
point.
there was no one.
And we were making horror films, which was
Yeah.
even more unusual, because in the 90s,
Yes.
there was no British horror.
No.
So we were the kind of emerging people and actually doing stuff, and it was Alex Shandon talking about sharing and what you were saying.
Yeah.
Alex, that's the one that taught myself and the production designer Neil Jenkins how to do all the squibs. So we learned how to do that on Club Death, which is the short film
Yes.
I did. And so we were then taking that up a gear. So we started getting like good at all these physical effects, but we were sharing knowledge. And this is, once again, there was no internet, so you would actually meet up with people in
And
pubs
talk.
and go around their house.
Yeah.
And you were talking. You would actually like, you know, you get bits of like, this is how you put a bit of armor plating on. This is how you tape it. These are the you had to buy special like explosive charges. So we were going to all of these film companies where theatrical pyrotechnics and stuff like that to basically learn how to do all of that kind of work, which was fascinating
Yes,
as well.
it was great.
But yeah, so and then getting Eileen involved. Eileen was very switched into a lot of people on the scene as well.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, a number of the actors in there, like Peter Goddard and
Yes.
Giorgio, were people
Yes,
that you'd
yes,
known.
I'd known on other films, and I'd brought them in on Razorblade Smile because they were good. They really were. They were nice people. They're easy to work with, and you just bring in people that you know. It's a little bit like that now, but the scene was so small. There wasn't a horror scene. There was no indie micro-budget horror scene in England, London, or wherever.
Well, we were the first people to
And
make
we
a
did
vampire
it
film
because-
since Hammer at that
Yes,
point. So,
yeah.
so when we brought this back, it wasn't like the normal stuff that British filmmakers were making, and it was kind of looked down upon because it was probably the lowest budget British film that ever got released in the cinema as well, which is incredible when you think about it.
Yes, and to tell you the truth, we really didn't think that it was going to mushroom and be quite so. So I didn't. I thought it was just another film. I just thought it was another. You know, I didn't. I loved the script. I loved playing Lilith, but because there was, it was just a really good time for horror, and Jake flew with it.
Well, going back to what you had asked about, did I expect it to become a cult film? Not necessarily, but we were kind of living a cult life at that point, though, weren't we?
Yeah.
So, we were going out in Soho. I was making pop. I did quite a number of pop promos with Eileen in as well.
Yes.
And they were great. So we were doing all of this work, and it was just
Redemption films.
Yeah,
with
Redemption
horror.
Films was blooming, and then I met Mark Morris, who I set up Nucleus Films with. This Mark worked at Redemption, so there was a lot of interconnections of all the people at that time. So we were just living this incredible life, and it was we really did have a good time.
Yes, we did.
We may have not had a lot of money, but we bloody had a great time.
Yeah, we had no fucking money, but we were really rocking it. But it was good because we were young. Not to say we're old now. I don't know.
We're a bit older.
We're just slightly older now as vampires. I don't age.
We're still having a good time, though, right?
Yeah, we were having a good time. Yeah, we were. Yeah. And there was no sex and drugs. Well. Yeah.
Was there ever a conversation of diving into this world again?
Well, yeah, because I did get commissioned by Manga Palm Pictures to actually write a sequel script for it, which I wrote, and it was called Razorblade Smile 2, The Devil's Vendetta, and it had Lilith Silver going up against the devil, and it's a great script. But the problem is that because I'd done this film for like no money, like 20 grand, when I wrote this other script, I didn't sort of censor myself, so I wrote the blockbuster version of what I wanted Razorblade Smile to be like in the beginning. Because there was elements in Razorblade Smile which I had to cut just because we couldn't do it. So, for instance, Lilith, she's just got a weapons coffin in her bedroom. Originally, the concept was she lived in her own funeral home home. So she had, she had a hearse, and she drove to
Yeah.
places, and the coffin would be in the back. And if she wanted to get rid of bodies, she had the incinerator there and things like that.
Yes.
All of that stuff got dropped because I couldn't afford to do it. But in the sequel, all of those things were put back in, plus a lot of kind of blockbuster kind of action type things. So when I sent them back the script, they said, this is really good, but it's going to cost about sort of 20 million. It's like, well, I think I could probably do it for 2, but they, but they didn't buy it because they wanted to do, they didn't want
That's
to
silly,
really,
actually. I think that was
they
silly.
only wanted to spend about 200 grand or something. I just couldn't do it for that.
No, because you needed all the plush. Yeah. What we didn't have in Razorblade.
Exactly.
We needed all, to really make it a mushroom and
Exactly, yeah. So in the end, I was then working on the Evil Alien script, and then I managed to get some finance for that. So the Razorblade Smile 2 script just fell away, but I wrote it, but it's a great script, but I would need a lot of resources to do it justice, and I didn't want to do another really cheap film again. I wanted to try and sort of carry on going up,
Razorblade Smile came out in the 90s, I believe it was.
98.
Which was just kind of before the boom of like Underworld and Blade and
Well,
all that.
Underworld was 4 years after us. So.
Yeah, you take that away.
So do you ever feel like this movie was just ahead of its time?
Yes, I do. And I think Underworld actually rode on Jake's. I hadn't seen Jake for a little while after that, but when I saw Underworld, I thought they'd taken a little bit of Razorblade Smile for Underworld, and I wouldn't say it, but I think they saw it.
Well, yeah, of course.
I know that.
I think
I
I take
more
it
money for them.
Well, I take it as a great compliment.
It's wonderful.
But what's interesting is more the fact when people say to me, "So you ripped off Underworld?"
No.
Because normally what happens, because people don't know the timeline and things like that.
Yeah.
But normally what happens is that low budget films try and rip off big budget films. What's really interesting about the Underworld Razorblade Smile situation, we've got a big budget film ripping off a low budget film.
Yes.
Which I thought was, that's quite nice that we. But I think because on the style side of it, all of the rubber stuff, that was way ahead of its time.
Yes, it was.
Because that was only in fetish clubs at that point.
Yes, I know. Stallion and I was doing
Ectomorph and
I was doing
House
a
of
lot,
Harlot, all those guys.
doing all the modelling for that.
And Eileen had modelled a lot of the rubber stuff, so we knew all of the people making the business. So the one thing in this film which is really good, and the budget didn't affect us, was actually the costumes.
Yes.
And Dina Costello,
Yes.
who was my girlfriend at the time, she
Yes.
did the costumes. She did an amazing job.
Yes, she
and
did.
we borrowed, but most of it was borrowed apart from the cat suits, because we ended up kind of destroying them.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it, but we were patching those up every night, weren't we? Because
Yes, because the squibs. Was it the squibs?
There was squibs, there was sweat,
blood,
there's when you
sweat.
fell over, because it was thin rubber and it would
Yes,
get...
I know, yeah.
But, so it was a bit like a sort of a bicycle repair kit at the night. You had to sort of fill out all the holes again, but you don't notice them there. We had the stunt suit, and then we had the nice one for the close-ups.
Yeah, the stunt ones.
Do we have any questions in the audience? But you are going to have to throw your voice because we don't have a mic for you.
I'll go. Seeing as I've not mentioned it before, I saw a 4K restoration of the Hitcher, or the Hitchhiker, the one with Rutger Hauer.
Yes, the Hitcher.
Because of the locations of it, it was a very stark film. But your film really captured that grain from the, from the Hammer films. How did you do that?
Well, one of the things about, asking about the kind of film look and the grain in the restoration, well, one of the reasons that the grain is really more noticeable in Razorblade Smile than, say, the Hitcher, is because Razorblade Smile was shot on the 16mm film, and it wasn't Super 16 because we couldn't afford a Super 16 camera. It was standard 16, which is so that's the smallest 16mm you can have. So because of that, inherently, when you're using that stock, it's got like a big, more noticeable grain structure because it actually comes from a smaller image. So when we've rescanned it back, you can really see all the grain, but I think the grain is really beautiful. And I wanted it to echo back to the kind of like Hammer films that I grew up with, and that kind of, with the red lighting and all that kind of really beautiful saturation. And film looks, I think it does have a nicer, like image density to it than digital stuff, because digital stuff is too clean, I think, So, but yeah, so going back to it, when we scanned it, I mean, the grain is there, and I didn't want to crush the grain and take it out. I love the grain because it feels like film. And like I say, the reason it might feel more like some of the older Hammer films is because back in the 70s, the stock was a lot slower. So with slow stock, it meant, like the image grain, if you were trying to use a faster stock in low light, you had bigger grain structure. So grain was always a lot more noticeable in older films. And then the technology was getting, we actually used the Kodak Vision 400T, which was the new stock there when for some of the night stuff, and that was the best stock that they had ever produced at the time, but it still had the grain in it. But because it was 16mm, you noticed that still, and I mean I really love that, and I think that film fans love seeing the grain as well. So I just wanted that to stay in there and be inherently part of that image. And vampire films feel that they should be on film, and they feel that it's got that analog world there.
Yes. No, I agree. Wonderful.
He's had a beautiful texture. That's really, it was fantastic to watch it like that. It really.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm really pleased with the look of it, and I think Vince, who shoots a lot of stuff now, mostly on digital. I think you enjoyed going back to film, didn't you, Vince?
Yeah, it was a big pleasure to spend time and really sort of just try and improve it, really, and try and get to that vision that you originally wanted.
Yeah. But when we were doing it, obviously when we were editing it, we were going often on a small laptop and stuff like that. So seeing it projected is when you really get the power of it as well, and it just looks lovely.
Lovely.
Anyone else?
Yeah, you said about a sequel you've already written a script to. Have you thought about adapting it into a graphic novel or anything along those lines?
Well, I've definitely thought about it, but how many of you people in here actually know about the Razorblade Smile comic and ever read it? Anyway.
No.
See, in the noughties there was a Razorblade Smile comic created by a good friend of Eileen's, John Gallagher.
Yes, and
he carried on. Yeah, it was called Dark God Rising, the storyline, and that was a continuation of the Razorblade style story and the characters. And it was a completely underground comic. It was an anthology horror comic, and there was only about 5 or 6 issues because he couldn't afford to keep on doing it. But it's beautiful. On the Blu-ray release, there's a whole extra feature about that interviewing with John and Paul Rogers, who wrote it, and that was a continuation of Razorblade Smile. I would really love to do the sequel as a comic if I could find somebody to draw it. But originally John and because they were doing it independently, that took them like a year between issues. Yeah, it took them so long. But he would send us pictures for approval.
Yeah, it was lovely. He's a lovely drawer. But yes, he wasn't doing it. He wasn't doing once a month, was he?
No.
It did take a long time.
Yeah. But we would love them. We would love them to finish that run because they needed to do about 3 more issues to finish it. So what we were hoping is when the Razorblade Smile UHD and Blu-ray comes out, we're kind of hoping if people take an interest in the comic, maybe there would be. If somebody then said, "Look, Jake, we'd like to do it," I would love to turn the sequel into a fully realised version, and a comic would be a great way of doing it if we could find somebody who would have the patience to do it, because it would be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
You ever thought of doing it into a cartoon?
Once again, I mean, I would love to see a cartoon of it, but I'm not an animator, and I know animators, and if you think it takes a long time to make a low-budget film just going out and shooting it with a camera, some guy at home doing animated frame by frame, that's years of work for a small team. So the problem is that animation isn't really a cheap option, and I'd hate it to be done as a bad digital version. Do you know what I mean? If it did it, I'd love to do it analog. What I would really love is a Ray Harryhausen stop-motion version of Lily Silver. That would be the best. That's what I would like to see, but who's going to do it? Come on, Aardman, you should take on Lily Silver.
Well, with that, the last question I have for you is the movie, the life that this movie has had since you made it, and now the 4K restoration and everything that's gone along with it, the kind of cult status that it's gained. If you could put it in a time machine and send it back to when you made it to show yourself with a little message in there, what would your message be to a young Jake West that made this movie?
Well,
and Eileen as well.
I think it would be more me going, yeah, you can do it. I mean, it's more the fact that because when I was making that film, I hadn't made a feature film, and I wasn't sure that I could even get through doing a whole longer shoot, because and I was relying on a lot of goodwill from a lot of people that I worked with, like the crew, the cast. So I don't think it would almost be more, you can do it. You did it.
Yeah, you could do it. You did
but,
it.
And I'd send a message back, saying the young version of me going, well, I hope you still got the energy now. You're
now you're older.
But if I could crack time travel, I probably would do something, more impressive than just go back sending messages to myself.
That's not the question.
No. How about you, Eileen? How about you, Eileen?
I'd actually sort of send messages to myself. Went back in Lily Silver time. I would say, what can we do? I don't know. Just
send some money back through time.
Got
a bigger budget.
Yeah, you can pay me. Yeah.
No, I think that, but when we were making it, the fact we never envisaged that, like quarter of a century later, we would be sitting here showing it again. Yeah. So the great thing about a film is that, the film will outlive us. I mean, this is the thing, a film in some ways is more like a vampire than us. It stays immortal. Everyone in there is captured at that age, and there's something kind of beautiful about that.
It is. It's a bit like a song, isn't it? A wonderful song, say Supertramp or, I don't know, Mass Attack or anything that you like. When you play that song, you go back to when you first saw that song, you heard that song, and it takes you back, and you go, wow, I love it, because it hit you in your heart at that particular time that you needed it. And I think that's what Razor Blade, because loads of films have been made, but it hit a certain heart in many people that they needed. They thought, do you know what? I really like it. Or Meatloaf, it just hits you. And as you play it, you feel good. And you know about that time back in 1998, what you were doing, who you were seeing, where were you living, because it takes you back to that. And it's such a classic film. And I didn't realise that we were making such a classic. And it is a classic. And it's a... Actually, we didn't realise, but Jake made a fantastic film which was on a low budget, but hit all the things that we like as humans.
Well, I think
do you see what I mean?
But I think the thing is, the film was made very much because I love vampire films and I loved that scene. So it was made very much with an affection for that as well, and the people around it. Because as a vampire fan, I wanted to be part of the vampire film kind of pantheon.
Yes.
So the fact that I pick up a book now, like the pocket book of vampire films and Razor Blade Smiles in there, for me is amazing. So my past self would be very happy about that it's kind of entered the lexicon. But if it's been successful, it's just because the audience likes it, and it's always lovely. And being Eileen is sometimes surprised when people come up to us and say, "Oh, I love that film,"
amazing,
because we don't expect it. And obviously, there's people that don't like it as well, and some of those want to tell you that too.
But
But the point is, a film, like I say, it kind of outlasts you. And it's funny because when we made that film, it was a contemporary film that we were making at the time, but now it's a period film set in the 90s.
I know. It's vintage. Retro.
Right, guys. Thank you so much for giving us the movie, and thank you for letting us show up.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for screening it in this lovely room.
Oh, thank you for having us. It really is awesome.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And what a lovely festival Romford Horror Film Festival is. And thank you to everyone who invited us, and also the audience for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You are. Thank you.
Cheers, man.